In the early 1970s, Maria Trinidad Ramirez Poblano emerged from obscurity to become known through Mexican media, particularly print newspapers. A humble woman from a poor, low-educated background but with a strong work ethic, she gained notoriety for a case worthy of comparison to any horror movie. Remarkably, the killer in this case garnered deep public sympathy. So, what crime did this woman commit? Join us at Crime Documentary Files as we cover the story. Maria Trinidad was born in 1926 in Tocotquac, north of Mexico City. She only completed the first few years of elementary school, as she had to start working at a young age. In her youth, she married her first husband and quickly became the mother of a baby girl, whom she named Maria Elena. Afterward, 4 more children followed, her eldest son, Pedro Mario Rey, and the youngest, Guer. At this point, already accustomed to hard labor, Maria Trinidad did whatever was necessary to support her family and take care of her children. She had a talent for cooking, and people loved the taste of her food, so selling food became her main livelihood. She sold tamales and atole, a traditional corn-based drink, a classic combination consumed daily by Mexicans in the afternoons. Often working late into the night, she would prepare all the ingredients needed for her famous tamales. Trinidad made a minimum of 200 tamales each day. The following morning, she would head out early to sell the food. Trinidad had a compact, sturdy wooden cart with rubber wheels where she transported all her goods. She would park in front of a bakery in Arita Iztapalapa, a working-class area of Mexico City, just a few feet from the corner of Emiliano Zapata Street, and begin selling her food every day. After a few years of marriage, Maria Trinidad decided to divorce her husband. She had discovered his infidelity on multiple occasions and chose to end the relationship. From that point on, she dedicated even more time to her 5 children. Sometime later, her eldest daughter, Maria Elena, got married and moved in with her husband, leaving Trinidad with the 4 younger children to continue fighting and moving forward. Trinidad often took her children to a barber shop near her tamale stand. It was there that she met the shop owner, Pablo Ramirez. One day, the barber asked Trinidad if she knew anyone who could wash the clothes he used in his shop as well as his jackets. Without hesitation, Trinidad took on the job herself and gave Pablo her address so he could drop off the laundry. 2 months passed before Pablo finally came to the woman's house with his laundry. Gradually, their working relationship turned into a friendship. Trinidad continued washing Pablo's clothes, ironing them, and returning them to him. By 1968, after a few months of friendship, Pablo started courting her. However, he wasn't the only one interested in the humble tamale vendor. The 42-year-old woman was also pursued by Jesus Alanuns, a neighbor in the area. His strategy was to buy as many tamales from Trinidad as possible. One day, Jesus mustered up the courage to propose, but by that time, Trinidad had already fallen for Pablo. She was honest with Jesus, saying, "I prefer the barber." After that, Jesus gave up his intentions toward the tamale vendor. It seemed that life was finally rewarding Trinidad with a good man to support her. However, Pablo's dark past caught Maria off guard. Trinidad and her 4 young children moved in with Pablo. At first, everything went smoothly. She continued selling tamales and atole while he kept working at the barber shop. But after a while, Pablo started spending more time at home and working fewer hours. Gradually, he reduced his work hours until he was completely confined to the bed or couch at home. Meanwhile, Trinidad continued working day and night to support the family. Every time she came home, Pablo controlled the sales money, taking most of it for himself and leaving her just enough to cover household expenses and buy ingredients for the next day's tamales. It seemed Pablo's dark past was catching up with him. The man, then 50 years old, used several different surnames. Besides Pablo, he went by Diaz, Ramirez, Diaz Gagos, or Diaz Ranan. Sometimes, he even used Ramirez Gallegos or changed his name to Rafael Diaz. In this way, he avoided being connected to his criminal record. Back in 1937, Pablo had assaulted a man and was sent to jail for causing bodily harm. 6 years later, in 1943, he returned to prison, this time for rape and injuring a young girl. At one point, he tried to redirect his life by joining the police force, but was rejected due to his criminal history. That's when he decided to use false names. Nonetheless, he ended up in prison again. In fact, this man took pride in having been incarcerated at the infamous Lumer prison 3 times. Lumer Palace was a large building used as a prison, located in the northeastern part of Mexico City. Today, it houses the National Archives, but during its dark years as a prison from 1900 to 1976, it was known as the Black Palace. Throughout his tumultuous life, Pablo developed a passion for boxing and wrestling. He learned how to navigate the world of betting and other illegal activities. While Pablo maintained the appearance of a hard-working barber, he was deeply entangled in the darker side of the gambling world. As you might have guessed, the ideal relationship between Trinidad and Pablo gradually deteriorated as his selfish, abusive nature emerged, driven only by his own needs. First, Pablo stopped working as a barber when he realized that Maria Trinidad worked hard and made more money selling tamales than he did cutting hair. Initially, Pablo promised to help her prepare food and sell it, but soon after, he gave up on that. He preferred to live off Trinidad's hard work, spending hours in front of the TV. Not satisfied with his lack of work and contributing nothing to Trinidad's efforts, Pablo started abusing her children from a previous relationship. Day by day, the situation in the household grew worse. Pablo had total control over Trinidad. She did everything while he did nothing. She was forced to hand over all her earnings to him, roughly 120 pesos, about $6, if she sold everything. From that, Pablo would only leave her with 15 pesos a day, less than $1. Trinidad had to perform miracles with that money, covering the family's basic needs and buying ingredients for tamales and atole to sell the next day. Meanwhile, Pablo spent the money on boxing or wrestling shows at Arena Coloso, which he loved to attend. Trinidad also suspected he was spending money on women outside the home, though she had no way to confirm it. Sadly, such abusive situations are common in many Mexican families, especially among lower-income households. Women are often conditioned to remain silent and endure. At this point, Maria Trinidad's life and that of her children had become a relentless struggle. Children had become a true tragedy. She bore an overwhelming burden, carrying all the family's responsibilities and expenses on her shoulders. But what truly tormented her each day was watching her children face all the hardships and poverty of a household where only she worked. Not to mention the abuse she endured from Pablo. At this point, she had an idea: I need to do something unprecedented for the sake of myself and my children. Finally, on the evening of Saturday, July 17, 1971, Maria Trinidad was preparing tamales to sell the next day as usual. Pablo came home from Marina Quiso drunk. To make matters worse, Maria Trinidad hadn't earned enough that day, and they were short on money to cover the month's expenses. Pablo immediately flew into a rage, using the noise the kids were making as an excuse to start his usual abusive routine, first with Trinidad and then with the children. Mario, 10 years old, and Guerrero, just 6, suffered the most. They were simply playing, as children do, jumping on the bed, but Pablo was ready to harm them. He grabbed a belt and unleashed a cruel beating. Every blow echoed in Maria Trinidad's mind and heart. As a mother, she felt as though she might faint from the pain her children were enduring. She sensed every lash as if she were the one being struck. She wanted to step in and stop the abuse but knew that if she tried, things would only get worse. She decided to wait and prayed for it all to end soon. The beating finally stopped when Pablo was exhausted. He sent the children to bed without dinner. Maria Trinidad tucked them in and began to comfort them, quietly crying alongside her children. Gradually, she managed to calm them down, and they fell asleep. Around 8:30 p.m., Trinidad went out to buy some bread. When she returned, Pablo told her that he wanted to separate and that she should leave if she didn't want him to continue his abusive behavior. He had never been a loving father figure to her children, but the beating that night had pushed her to the breaking point. She continued preparing the food to sell the next day, working until after 10:30 p.m., while Pablo lounged on the couch, wearing only a t-shirt and underwear, watching TV. Suddenly, Trinidad recalled the terrible beating, the bruises and the wounds Pablo had inflicted on her children. She thought about the debts, her suspicions about Pablo and his infidelity. Once again, anger and pain overwhelmed her. She couldn't endure any more abuse. Things couldn't go on like this. She stood there for a moment watching Pablo as he dozed off in front of the TV. Then she noticed a baseball bat. Gathering the strength she needed, she grabbed the bat and decided to strike him with all her might. Once she was sure Pablo was fast asleep, Trinidad quietly approached, blinded by hatred and resentment. After 3 years of abuse and mistreatment, she delivered the first blow to his head. In Trinidad's mind, all the horrific scenes of abuse replayed as if it were a horror movie. Over and over, she saw Pablo mistreating and beating the people she loved most. After the first blow, he groaned, and Trinidad thought if she didn't keep hitting him, Pablo would react and attack her. So Trinidad raised the bat again and struck him several more times. After beating him with the bat, she remembered the axe that the landlady, Maria Teresa, had lent her a few days earlier and went outside to find it. Trinidad returned to the house filled with tension and hatred, but also a sense of satisfaction for becoming a brave mother. With each strike, the once submissive woman was disappearing. She glanced into the room to check if the children were still asleep in their beds. Trinidad let her tears flow as she saw her children sleeping peacefully. Then she went back to the living room to see if Pablo was still alive. He was unconscious but alive. The man had survived 4 blows without dying. In those few seconds, he slipped into a coma while Maria Trinidad was torn between anxiety and despair. She feared her children might catch her, or worse, that Pablo would recover and undoubtedly kill her. All these thoughts overwhelmed Trinidad with panic. She was still scared, her mind clouded. She knew she had to finish what she started and get rid of the body. She returned to the room with the axe and severed Pablo's legs, then his arms. She tried stuffing the remains into a sack, but they wouldn't fit. Once again, she grabbed the axe and threw his head into a large oil drum. The children were used to the noises their mother made while cooking late at night, so they didn't notice anything. They thought it was just the usual sounds. At this point, Pablo's torso and limbs were nearly all stuffed into the sack. She only had to arrange them neatly before sewing the bag shut. Trinidad hid the sack containing Pablo's remains under the bed, along with the drum holding his head. Then she began to think about how to dispose of everything in a secret place. Early Sunday morning, the tamale vendor had cleaned up almost perfectly. Relying only on the light from the TV, Trinidad scrubbed all traces from the house and washed the tools she had used. She even took a bath and washed her clothes. In the morning, Trinidad realized she couldn't do anything to get rid of the body, so she went out to sell tamales as usual. But in between selling tamales, the horrors of the previous night replayed in her mind. Moreover, she feared that one of the children might discover what was hidden under the bed. At the end of her workday, Maria Trinidad hurried back home. Everything was just as she had left it in the morning. Pablo's remains had been under the bed all day Sunday until early Monday morning. She had slept there after the murder the previous day, and again on Sunday night after returning from work. By Monday morning, July 19th, Trinidad woke up very early. Before dawn, she loaded the heavy sack onto her wooden cart and took it to an empty lot in the Justo Sierra neighborhood, south of the city, to get rid of everything. Trinidad thought she had escaped her troubles, but it wasn't long before the neighbors on Sur 71 Street in Justo Sierra noticed a foul stench coming from a vacant lot near house number 8. The rotten smell was so strong that it made the air unbearable to breathe. They assumed it was the smell of rotting chickens, as there was a chicken farm about 1,000 feet away. The lot, like many others in the capital, had been abandoned for a long time and was frequently used by street vendors and passers-by as a makeshift bathroom. People also dumped all kinds of trash there. By 9 a.m. on July 19, 1971, a sanitation worker was doing his usual rounds. He was responsible for collecting trash across about 10 blocks and had started his work at 5 a.m. He was nearly finished when some neighbors asked him to check the vacant lot and help them remove a large sack that seemed to be the source of the horrid stench. At that moment, 2 women accompanied the worker, Esperanza Hernandez and her maid Paula Martinez. The 3 of them approached the lot, but a strong gust of wind carried the foul smell toward them, forcing them to step back. The worker, broom in hand and covering his nose with a handkerchief, cautiously moved closer to the stinking sack. Esperanza and Paula watched from the edge of the lot, accustomed to bad smells, and despite lacking a mask or gloves, the worker touched the sack, which was over 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. One side of the sack was marked with cupo, corn and beans, capacity 200 pounds. He expected to find chicken feathers or feet inside, but that wasn't the case. As he attempted to open the sack, which had been sewn shut on all sides, the odor became even worse. He couldn't see what was inside but felt something strange prompt him to quickly leave the lot. He told the 2 women that he would call the police because something wasn't right, and that's exactly what he did. When the police arrived, they covered their faces with cloths and began to open the sack. As they did, a swarm of green flies flew out. The sharp knife of one of the officers easily cut through the fabric, revealing a human foot wearing a blue sock. Shocked by the discovery, they decided to notify their superiors. Deputy Chief and Chief of Police, General Ruel Mola, arrived at the scene even before the judicial investigators. As they continued to examine the contents, they confirmed that inside the sack were not only the legs of a man but also a headless and armless torso. The photographer from the police department took dozens of pictures while other officers searched the area for the missing head. General Mendola ordered agents to comb through the lot and dig through some dirt and piles of trash, suspecting that the head might have been buried somewhere. However, the search yielded no results. Fingerprint experts took prints from the hands of the deceased, and the large size of the hands suggested they belonged to a large man. They placed the body parts into plastic bags and transported them to the forensics department via ambulance. Afterward, Secret Service experts worked diligently and successfully identified the victim through his fingerprints. The body belonged to Pablo Diaz Ramirez, 53 years old. This was his real name, not one of the aliases he used to hide his criminal record. It seems that his criminal history led to his quick identification. At this point, Esperanza, the owner of house number 508, and Paula, the cleaning worker, were asked to report to the police station for questioning. With the most comprehensive criminal record available, the agents from the investigation department went to Republic Street, number 1, in the Portals neighborhood to locate the family of the deceased, as it was the last recorded address for Pablo. Neighbors there informed them that he had moved out 6 months earlier and that his wife sold tamales on the street. The agents learned that the barber's wife was named Maria Trinidad and lived at Pino Street, number 15. The police quickly arrived at the location, a semi-dilapidated house on a quiet street with little traffic. Inside, a woman stood next to a wooden table, ironing clothes. When the agents knocked, she came out. Maria Trinidad was at home on Monday afternoon, listening to the radio with her 3 youngest children when the Secret Service officers arrived to speak with her. Trinidad coldly asked, without making direct eye contact, "What do you want?" The agents began the usual questioning, asking if she was the wife of the barber, Pablo. Trinidad answered yes. When they asked where he was, her face turned pale. The officers closely observed every reaction of the 45-year-old woman, who had dark skin, thick long braids, and a face typical of the Otomi people. In a rough, dry, yet anxious voice, she said, "I don't know because he left for work on Saturday and hasn't returned." The agents continued to press, asking if Trinidad had any idea where he might be. She replied, "I don't know, but he often disappears for a few days. He'll surely be back soon." The investigators glanced at each other, unsure whether they should break the news to Maria Trinidad about her husband's death or not. They were curious to see how she would react. However, from the woman's stoic and cold demeanor, they sensed that she was strong enough to handle the information, so they informed her, "Your husband is dead." Unexpectedly, Maria Trinidad didn't even flinch. She didn't say a word, nor did she seem confused. She closed her eyes, and her eyelids and lips trembled slightly. Her expression became more distinct. The officers had anticipated that she might break down, show emotion, or become distressed after hearing what had happened, but the opposite occurred. She remained calm, indifferent, and her eyes suddenly sparkled. One agent later remarked that he sensed something malicious, a reflection of years of pent-up resentment in Trinidad's eyes. The officer suspected that she already knew about the incident. Agent Banderas then informed Maria Trinidad that she needed to accompany them to the police station. She remained silent and didn't even ask the investigators why she had to go with them. With some anxiety, Trinidad asked for permission to put on a sweater, as the wind was starting to pick up. She said goodbye to her 10-year-old daughter, Reina, who was lying in bed reading a book, and turned off the radio that was announcing the end of a play. The girl was frightened when she heard about her stepfather's death and worried when she saw her mother being taken to the police station. At the commander's office, where Trinidad was interrogated, they asked her if her husband had any enemies. Without hesitating for a second, she responded affirmatively, telling the officers that in recent weeks he had been very nervous. 3 times he told me that he had been arrested for selling marijuana, and when Pablo wanted to get out of the business, they threatened him. The officers then asked if she knew the names of these men. She replied, "I don't know, but he mentioned that they usually met him at Arena Coloso during the wrestling matches because Pablo was a huge fan." After some back-and-forth questioning, the officers directly confronted Trinidad, asking if she and Pablo argued often. She was silent for a moment, thinking about what to say, and then, with a shaky voice, Trinidad told the truth. She admitted that they did. She then told them that Pablo was her second husband and that she had separated from her first husband because he had affairs with other women, even in their own home. As she continued her story, Trinidad described to the officers how she met Pablo at his barber shop, detailing how their relationship developed, until they eventually moved in together. One of the officers asked if Pablo had accepted her and her children. Without hesitation, Trinidad replied, "Yes, sir." Up until that point, the agents were focused on gathering as much information about Pablo as possible, as they suspected he had been killed for personal reasons, and they were determined to clarify the entire situation. After being asked if she frequently argued with her husband, the woman became much more anxious. She admitted, "Yes, we argued often." Trinidad told the investigators that Pablo didn't love her children and would beat them for any reason, using whatever he had on hand to hurt them. Trinidad also told the officers that in their final argument, precisely the previous Saturday, July 17, Pablo had told her that he was going to leave her and go with another woman. As she continued, she assured the investigators that the whole situation had made her very angry, especially because this man barely worked, spent all day lying in bed, took all the money she earned from selling tamales every day, and left her with just a small amount for household expenses and ingredients for the tamales. And now he was going to abandon her as if nothing had happened. Trinidad went on to talk about Pablo's nights out, how he went to the movies, to the Coloso Stadium to watch boxing or wrestling, but when he was home, he beat the children and also mistreated her. Sensing an opportunity to get Trinidad to tell the truth, one officer asked if that was the reason she killed him. Trinidad hesitated for a second, remained silent, but then she broke down. She looked at the agents and replied, "Yes, I killed him for that, and he deserved it." When they asked her to tell them everything that had happened, Trinidad, now calmer, less tense, and somewhat relieved, recounted everything that had occurred and what she had done from Saturday, July 17th, until Monday, July 19th, when she opened the door because someone knocked and it was the police. At several moments during the story, she paused, cried, and expressed regret, but then continued either narrating or answering the investigators' questions. During the interrogation, Trinidad expressed her suspicion that Pablo had attempted to sexually abuse her youngest daughter, Reina, who was only 10 years old. She also mentioned that dismembering a man and disposing of the body without anyone knowing isn't an easy task. This led the Secret Service investigators to believe that Trinidad must have had at least one accomplice. As a result, they focused their investigation on Pedro Martinez, Trinidad's 17-year-old eldest son, and her son-in-law, Mario Rendiz, who was married to Maria Elena. Immediately, Trinidad denied this theory. She told the officers, "I acted alone the entire time." However, the officers ordered the arrests of Pedro and Mario, yet the police gathered no further clues, as all three individuals consistently maintained that Trinidad had acted on her own. At Trinidad's home, the police found a saw, several knives, a baseball bat, and an axe. Because Pedro had worked for a long time at a butcher shop, the police believed that he might have helped his mother dismember his stepfather. However, Pedro assured the officers that he only learned about the incident on Monday, July 19th, when his sister Maria Elena told him and said that their mother had been arrested. As for Mario, he also emphasized to the police, "I can prove I was far away from my mother-in-law's house at the time of the incident." At this point, the agents asked a variety of questions, and Trinidad confirmed that no one else was responsible for the murder, as she had planned and carried it out entirely on her own, with nothing but her own strength. Given this definitive statement, the forensic conclusion, and the lack of evidence, the authorities were forced to release Mario and Pedro on the same day, July 19th. They assigned a committee to conduct a forensic examination of the couple's home, where they gathered all key evidence. In addition to everything believed to have been used by Trinidad to commit the crime, the investigators also found Pablo's head still in the oil drum under her bed. Forensics concluded that Trinidad had acted alone, as the man died from blood loss while she severed his limbs. This process would have taken quite a bit of time if done by just one person. If she had been assisted, the lower limbs would have been separated from the body much faster, the head would have been cut off immediately afterward, and the bleeding would have stopped once the heart ceased to function. Pablo was dismembered while he was still alive but unconscious. For weeks, the press reported on various theories and inconsistencies raised by the investigators about the bloody aspects of the case. Finally, a year after the horrific event, in July 1972, Trinidad was still in prison. The prosecutor in the case requested a sentence of 20 to 40 years for the woman, with aggravating circumstances being premeditation and cruelty. She was convicted of premeditated murder, illegal burial, and desecration of a corpse. Trinidad expressed remorse and consistently claimed that she killed her husband because of the abuse he inflicted on her children and for no other reason. After reviewing the case, the judge sentenced Trinidad to 40 years in prison. She served the first part of her sentence at the Texpan Women's Detention Center in Zilco before being transferred to Santa Martha Acatitla. Trinidad never changed her story about what happened. When she became eligible for release, she was freed after serving 20 years in prison. She went straight to the Basilica of Guadalupe and then returned to her hometown, where she lived out her final years. 4 years later, she passed away. According to several legends, the woman allegedly took some pieces of her husband's flesh, mixed them with other ingredients, and stuffed them into the tamales she sold on Sunday, July 18th, and Monday, July 19, 1971. This theory was never confirmed. Dear viewers, it's clear that the details of this case are incredibly brutal and should never have happened, but when we consider the years of abuse and humiliation that Trinidad endured until one day she grew tired of the constant suffering, we can understand her actions to some extent. Sadly, Trinidad did not choose the best way to handle the situation, but it was the only way she found to free herself. Trinidad took justice into her own hands. Finally, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Please leave your comments below the video. For now, goodbye and see you next time.
The case I'm going to tell you about today took place in Osaka, located in the Kansai region of Japan. While the Kanto region represents modern economic power, Kansai is famous for its rich history. Osaka is the third largest city in Japan, known for its unique food culture and bustling commercial districts. The city features historic buildings, such as Osaka Castle, modern skyscrapers, ATV Tower, and popular shopping and dining areas like Shinseibashi, Dotonbori, and various gourmet streets offering a diverse array of delicious foods. Osaka is a vibrant city that attracts many tourists. With the rise of tourism, many locals rent out their vacant homes for short-term stays, offering guests homemade meals and other services. Numerous B&Bs bed and breakfasts have sprung up. Compared to traditional hotels, these B&Bs are more affordable, allowing visitors to fully experience local culture. B&B stands for bed and breakfast, which refers to small, budget-friendly accommodations that provide an overnight stay and breakfast. Most B&B owners operate family-run businesses. In Osaka, many locals have developed personalized B&Bs based on various themes, such as hot springs, Japanese cuisine, and other local specialties. However, among the many B&Bs, there are also black B&Bs, where guests don't need to show identification to check in. These black B&Bs are less formal, with basic facilities and environments, but their relatively low prices make them popular with certain groups. The main character of the story is Saki Kondo. She was born in Hemi City, Hyogo Prefecture. Saki worked as a saleswoman at a parts manufacturing company in Maeda City, Hyogo Prefecture, northwest of Osaka. In 2018, after a day of work, Saki left the office as usual. She said goodbye to her colleagues, packed her belongings, and left the company. That evening, after work, she took a train straight to Osaka. Upon arriving, she walked hand in hand with a man, and they headed in a certain direction before disappearing into the night. On Saturday, February 17, 2018, the Hyogo Prefectural Police received a call from a woman reporting that her daughter, Saki Kondo, had been missing for 2 days. Saki was known for her dedication to her job. When she failed to show up for work the previous day without requesting leave, and her supervisor was unable to reach her, they contacted her mother to check on her. Saki's mother, who lived in their hometown in Hyogo Prefecture, stayed in close contact with her daughter every day. After receiving the call from Saki's colleague, she became very worried. She immediately tried calling Saki's cell phone but couldn't get through. After waiting another day without hearing back, she grew increasingly anxious and felt something was wrong, so she decided to contact the police. Upon receiving the report, the police promptly launched an investigation. The missing person, Saki Kondo, a 27-year-old office worker, was employed in Maeda City, Hyogo Prefecture. She had previously lived with her mother, older brother, and grandfather. Her father, who worked in metal processing, had been working in Thailand for an extended period. It was rare for him to have the opportunity to return home and reunite with the family. Almost every year, Saki's family planned a trip together to visit her father in Thailand. During these trips, Saki developed a strong desire to travel abroad. Determined to pursue her passion, Saki worked hard to improve her English, hoping to visit more countries in the future. Over the years, she attended a prestigious all-girls private school in Hyogo Prefecture with excellent academics. Performance-wise, she joined the school's brass band club and lived life to the fullest each day. From a young age, Saki placed great importance on language learning, particularly English. She made significant efforts and achieved a high level of proficiency, allowing her to read English magazines and watch English videos without any difficulty. After graduating from high school, she was accepted into a local university. With her strong English skills, She often spent her holidays traveling to European countries for short trips, where she made several international friends. After graduating, Saki started working early and went through a few job changes. 2 years ago, she secured a position as a saleswoman at a parts manufacturing company in Maida City. She then moved into the company's employee dormitory and began living independently. Saki was a warm and cheerful person. If she encountered a foreigner asking for directions while on the street, she was always kind enough to help. She often invited her foreign friends over to visit her home. At work, she was always willing and enthusiastic to assist her colleagues with any English-related issues they had. Saki was well liked by both her colleagues and family members. She was kind, friendly, intelligent, sensitive, and responsible, so she would never intentionally lose touch with the important people in her life. She lived a relatively simple life and seemed to hold no grudges against anyone. Her sudden disappearance left her family, friends, and colleagues deeply perplexed. The police then investigated Saki's social connections and uncovered a crucial lead from a friend. It turned out that Saki had told a friend on February 15th, the day she went missing, "I'm going on a date with an American after work. His name is Jay. I just met him online." This clue immediately caught the attention of the police. They compiled all the surveillance videos from relevant locations and streets to track Saki's movements after she left work. The footage revealed that a man, suspected to be Jay, was with her on February 15, 2018, the day after Valentine's Day. Saki left work and headed straight to a nearby train station. She took a train for about an hour to Morinomiya Station in Osaka. Around midnight, surveillance footage near the station showed her walking with a man. The two seemed close, displaying affectionate gestures, and were heading south. They looked like a couple. The surveillance system eventually tracked Saki and the man entering a hotel not far from the train station. They stayed at a B&B. However, in the following days, the surveillance footage only showed the man repeatedly entering and leaving the B&B, but Saki was not seen again. The man in the footage had a tall, slender build and kept his face fully covered. Surveillance video showed him wearing black clothing, including black pants, a black short jacket, and black short boots. He also wore a black baseball cap, a white face mask, and a pair of dark sunglasses, completely obscuring his face. It seemed like he was trying to hide something. Additionally, for reasons unknown, he was always seen carrying a large backpack when entering and leaving the premises, which looked quite suspicious. The B&B they stayed at was located in the Higashi-Sumiyoshi district of Osaka. It was an old 3-story building. The exterior white, the walls appeared to have not been cleaned for a long time, showing signs of yellowing. The walls had several low, rectangular windows. The police managed to track down the owner of the B&B, hoping he still had a record of the guests who checked in at that time. However, unfortunately, it turned out to be a black market B&B. While it was listed for rent on Airbnb, a popular home rental app, it didn't have a proper business license. This meant that guests could book a room through the app without providing their real identity. As a result, the police were unable to determine the identity of the suspicious man. The police then shifted their focus back to the surveillance footage to track down the suspect. At that time, road surveillance systems were quite advanced and had a high coverage rate in the cities. The suspect seemed to be focused only on disguising himself and hiding his identity, without much awareness of counter-surveillance measures, so his movements were relatively easy to trace through the video footage. The police quickly pinpointed his location. A few days after Saki's disappearance, the suspect had left Osaka, moved to several other B&Bs, and was currently in another city. On February 22, 2018, a week after the disappearance, police arrested the suspect at a B&B in the area. The suspect was identified as Yevgeny Vasilovich Bot-R, born in 1991, a 27-year-old American tourist. He went by the name Jay online, the same person who had gone on a date with Saki. Jay was born in Odessa, Ukraine. His mother, Regina, was Ukrainian, and his father was Bulgarian, a professional doctor. When Jay was young, his parents divorced. Later, his mother met Benny Daisy, an engineer from the United States. They connected through a social networking site, specifically one that linked North American men with Eastern European women. After getting to know each other, Mr. Daisy fell in love with his mother. He personally traveled to Ukraine to bring her and Jay back to live with him. After returning to Texas, the two got married and started a new family life together. This is how Jay, then 9 years old, became an American citizen. Jay's stepfather treated him like his own son and cared for him with all his love. However, Jay never fully opened up to him. In his stepfather's eyes, Jay was very shy and always seemed to be just his mother's son. He had very few friends and didn't seem interested in expanding his social circle, only talking to his mother at home. No matter how much his stepfather cared, Jay chose to remain silent. On the other hand, it seemed that his mother had her own plans. After getting married and immigrating to the U.S., she began working towards obtaining a nursing degree. After several years of hard work and study, she achieved her dream and established herself in the United States. One day, she quietly took Jay and left Mr. Daisy. He searched tirelessly for them, but for a long time, there was no news. This caused him great heartbreak. Then, one day, he unexpectedly received a letter from his wife, Regina. Before he could feel any joy, he was left stunned. Regina had actually requested that he sign the divorce papers enclosed in the letter. It turned out that she had never truly loved him, but had only used him to become a legal U.S. citizen. After leaving Texas, she and her son moved to Long Island, New York, where she found a job using her nursing certification. Not long after, she met and fell in love with a local engineer. They eventually planned to get married. It was at this point that she realized she was still legally married to Mr. Daisy, whom she had long forgotten, so she wrote to him openly requesting that he sign the divorce papers. Upon reading the letter, Mr. Daisy finally understood everything. He realized he had merely been a means for her to immigrate to the United States. No longer wanting to hold on in vain, he was ready to sign the divorce papers. Afterward, Regina was free to marry her new love as she had hoped. The two of them moved to a house in Mastic Beach and began the happy life they had long desired. In 2007, Jay enrolled at William Floyd High School in the area and excelled during his 4 years there. After graduating in 2011, he voluntarily enlisted in the military and successfully passed the exams. He joined the U.S. Air Force, as he had hoped. According to regulations, Jay was required to serve in the military for 4 years, but for reasons unknown, he was discharged after only 11 months and returned to his hometown in Long Island. In the time that followed, he led an idle life. Those who knew Jay were surprisingly unanimous in their assessment of him. They described him as quiet, shy, and reserved. He seemed to have a deep fascination with Japanese culture, always eager to visit Japan for vacations, and had traveled there more than 10 times. However, his purpose in going to Japan was not so simple. Beyond sightseeing, he also longed to find and love a gentle and virtuous Japanese woman. Anyone familiar with him knew that he had an unusual obsession with Japanese women. He had once confessed to a friend that he wanted to marry a Japanese wife. At the end of January 2018, Jay obtained a 90-day tourist visa and flew from the United States to Kansai, Japan. He planned to stay there for an extended period to enjoy a fulfilling experience. From this perspective, it's no surprise that Jay met Saki. However, when confronted with accusations regarding Saki's disappearance, Jay refused to admit anything, stating, "I don't know anything about her." With the surveillance evidence in hand, the police, of course, did not believe his denial. On the same day Jay was arrested, the police also obtained a search warrant from the court. A search was conducted at the B&B where the two had stayed, but the police did not find Saki inside, nor did they find any of her belongings or suspicious bloodstains in the worst-case scenario. So what method did Jay use to make a living? Breathing person suddenly disappear into thin air right before everyone's eyes. A sudden ominous feeling began to take hold. The police realized that the chances of Saki still being alive somewhere were incredibly slim. It was possible that she had been murdered. Over the next 2 days, the police carefully searched the B&B again and also checked other B&Bs where the suspect had stayed in recent days. Finally, they found a crucial clue at one of these locations. The suspicious B&B was located at Hanazono-Kyo 1-chome, Nishinariku, Osaka, just a 6 to 7 minute walk from the nearest station. It was a 3-story apartment building with gray exterior walls, surrounded by scaffolding, as it appeared to be under renovation. Like the others, this was also a black market B&B. The rooms were very simple, and the surrounding environment was not great. Staying here for a night cost only 230 yen, which is about 14 United States dollars. Because of the low price, it was typically rented by night workers and laborers in the area. The owner of this B&B had a strong the B&B owner recounted. A few days ago, a handsome foreign guest with a suitcase stayed at my B&B for one night. Foreign tourists are rare here, so I paid special attention to him. After observing the scene, several police officers accompanied the B&B owner to the room where Jay had stayed. As soon as they entered, they noticed a strange odor, a mix of something foul and an overpowering fragrance. The closer they got to the room, the more unbearable the smell became. When they opened the door, they found a small 6-square-meter room. The cramped space was barely enough for one person to lie down. The odor in the room was so strong that everyone present felt deeply uncomfortable. It didn't take long for them to discover a suitcase left behind in the room. It seemed to have been sprayed with a deodorizer, possibly in an attempt to mask some foul smell, but it had clearly failed. The investigators carefully approached and opened the suitcase. They were stunned when they found a decaying human head inside. The sight at the scene left many of those present shocked and horrified. DNA comparisons confirmed that the head belonged to Saki, who had been missing for nearly 10 days. Faced with this new evidence, Jay knew he could no longer deny the truth. Desperate, the perpetrator confessed everything, recounting how he had met Saki, yet even to the end, he repeatedly claimed, "I didn't mean to kill her." It turned out that while Jay was known to friends and family as a reserved and quiet person, he had a completely different persona online. Though he had deleted all his related accounts after the incident, the truth was uncovered through the recovery of his data records. Jay frequently used Tinder, a dating app with users worldwide, mainly young and middle-aged individuals. Users can upload photos of themselves, add their interests and skills, and introduce themselves to others. If two users show mutual interest, they can connect. Once connected, they can start chatting online. The app also supports location services, allowing users to connect with others nearby. Jay seemed to lack confidence in his appearance, so he didn't post any real photos of himself on his profile. Instead, he found a picture online and used a more appealing online name, Jay. He had visited Japan multiple times and used the location suggestion feature of social media apps to connect and chat with local women, including Saki. He had been involved with nearly 10 Japanese women. Clearly unsatisfied with just chatting online, he tried every possible way to persuade them to go out and spend the night at a B&B to satisfy his desires. He was fascinated by a series of romantic encounters, engaging in one-night stands. In January 2018, Jay obtained a 90-day tourist visa for Japan and began his pursuit of beauty. This time, he chose the Kansai region, specifically selecting various black market B&Bs along the train line and frequently changing locations while meeting different Japanese women. On February 12, 2018, Jay checked into a B&B in the Higashikata ward of Osaka, planning to stay there for a week. During this time, he met Saki through a social app. Both Saki and Jay were the same age. Saki had a beautiful, delicate, gentle, and outgoing appearance, perfectly matching his ideal image of a Japanese woman. Saki also showed interest in the young foreign man. By chance, they successfully matched on the social app. Saki's English was excellent, and there were no communication barriers, so her enthusiasm quickly attracted Jay. After a while, they exchanged contact information and added each other as friends on Instagram. Days after chatting, Jay wanted to invite Saki to Osaka. However, Mae, where Saki lived, was 50 kilometers away from Osaka, requiring more than an hour by train. She felt it was too soon to meet in person since they had just met, so she told him, "I'm busy with work and would like to get to know you better first." No matter how hard Jay tried to be persuasive or assertive, Saki still refused to meet. Fearing that his target might slip away, Jay felt the need to be more decisive. He pressured her by saying, "If you don't meet me, I'll come to your house." Hearing this, Saki found it difficult to refuse. He continued to push her, "I know where you work and where you live. If you don't agree to meet, I'll come to your house." After much consideration, Saki finally compromised. She promised Jay she would come to Osaka to meet him after work on Thursday. The day of their meeting quickly arrived. That day, after work, Saki took the train to Osaka's Morinomiya station. Jay was already waiting nearby. When Saki saw Jay in person, She was a bit surprised because he looked completely different from his profile picture on the social app. However, Jay was friendly and considerate. After a few pleasant exchanges, Saki let her guard down, and the two walked together toward the B&B, laughing and chatting closely. The next day was still a workday for Saki, so she planned to return to Ma early to be on time for work and had no intention of staying long, but she never imagined she would never get the chance to return. During the investigation, the police discovered that before Saki, there had been 4 to 5 other women who stayed at the same B&B with Jay. However, none of them were harmed. Saki was the only victim. Currently, finding the rest of Saki's remains had become the top priority. After several days of interrogation, Jay finally admitted to dismembering and disposing of Saki's body. However, he remained tight-lipped about what had happened at the B&B that night. On February 25, 2018, based on Jay's confession, the police went to the mountain near Osaka and entered the forest. After searching, they found a spot where the ground had been disturbed. There, the police discovered Saki's arm, and her torso was found not far away. On the same day, Saki's legs were found in a bamboo grove in Kyoto. No one could have imagined that Saki, who was so kind and enthusiastic, would meet such a tragic end. Her family was devastated after learning the news about their daughter. The forensic report indicated that Saki died from suffocation, but to this day, Jay still refuses to confess the truth. He appears very fearful and repeatedly tells the police, "I didn't mean to." The police speculate that the two may have had an argument at the B&B, during which Saki was accidentally killed by Jay. After realizing that Saki was no longer breathing, Jay became terrified. Once he calmed down, he started thinking of ways to cover up the incident. He quickly turned off Saki's phone to prevent her family and friends from contacting her. He then logged out of their social media accounts to hide their connection. Finally, he searched the internet for various methods to dispose of the body and carried out his plan. The next day, Jay went out with a large bag on his back and purchased a saw and a bottle of deodorizer. He extended his stay at the room for a few more days and quietly dismembered Saki's body in the rented room during the night. He disposed of her body parts in the mountains of Osaka and Kyoto. As for the head, the most easily identifiable part, he placed it in a suitcase and hid it in another B&B. To mask the odor, he sprayed a large amount of deodorizer in the room to prevent others from noticing. However, his efforts were ultimately futile. Strangely, Jay didn't seem to have any intention of fleeing Japan. When he was arrested, he was staying at a B&B in Nara. After the incident, he had ample time to escape and return to the US, but he didn't seem to have any such plans and continued his travels as planned. After hearing the news of his daughter's murder, Saki's father, who was far away in Thailand, hurried back to Japan. For the next year, he closely followed the developments of the case. He hoped the court would handle the case and severely punish the murderer to bring justice for his daughter. A year after the incident, in 2019, the case was tried at the Kobe District Court. Since it couldn't be proven that Jay had the intent to commit murder, he was ultimately convicted of 2 crimes, manslaughter and disposing of a body. Jay appeared gaunt in court. He continued to defend himself, insisting that he never intended to kill her and pleaded for Saki's family to forgive him. He repeatedly apologized, saying, "I will carry the burden of this crime until the day I die." However, no one believed his words. Although his intent at the time of the crime couldn't be determined, his actions afterward showed no remorse. Instead of turning himself in, he tried to cover up the crime by deleting accounts, dismembering, and burying the victim's body. These were all deliberate, selfish, and callous acts. Due to the clear evidence, the trial proceeded swiftly. On January 22, 2019, the Kobe District Court officially convicted Jay of manslaughter and other charges, sentencing him to 8 years in prison. This sentence sparked outrage among many people. Saki's family felt deeply disappointed, believing that the punishment was too lenient for the killer and that the truth had not been fully revealed. The trial ended hastily, with Jay remaining silent and uncooperative. They may never know why their daughter was killed. It's worth noting that in the past 2 years, this was the 8th illegal incident involving the use of B&Bs in Japan. The severity of this case brought attention to the issue of black market B&Bs among relevant authorities. Following the incident, Japan has made efforts to regulate the B&B industry. Today, privately managed BNBs are required to verify the true identity of their guests to prevent black market BNBs from attracting tourists and becoming breeding grounds for crime. As of now, Jay has served 5 years of his sentence, and he will soon be released in 3 years. However, Saki, a young woman who once had a bright future and dreams of traveling the world, will never have the chance to fulfill those dreams. Finally, let's be cautious with social media. Sometimes it can be a double-edged sword that negatively impacts your life. That concludes today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, and take care.